What is up, wrestling fans? It is Kevin, and I'm welcoming you to the Two Bros Wrestling Show. And yes, I can do math. I know we are not two bros this week. Once again, we are without Doug, but sending all our love to our brother there. But we had to get back on the air. We are in WrestleMania season, and the what we have is um, the last stop on that road to WrestleMania. And that is Elimination Chamber coming up next weekend. So we had to get back, talk about it, and we'll be two bros tonight. Two bros, two gals, whatever. I need you to chime in. Let me know what you think. We're going to go through the matches, who we think is going to win, who we think are going to fill those final spots and take that last spot in both the men and women's punch their ticket to possibly going to WrestleMania. And that's a good place as any to start before we go to our main event. Let's talk some news. The opening bell, WrestleMania season being upon us. Let's start with a WrestleMania story. A lot of news outlets reporting this week, and you may have heard this. Oh, WrestleMania is in trouble, right? Okay, let's get some nuanced look at what is going on. Yes, WrestleMania has not sold as many tickets this year as it was had already sold by this point for WrestleMania 41. Not like this, though, is going to be an empty stadium. So let's just forget the idea that this is going to be a bust of a WrestleMania. To date, we have sold around 40,000 tickets for each night. By comparison, WWE had sold about 10,000 tickets more per night at this stage last year. There's still 2 months to go, and you're going to sell a lot of tickets in those 2 months. 40,000 people in a stadium is not going to look empty. So even if it was to take place today, it is not like it's going to be a failure the way that WWE haters are wanting to paint this as. But as far as what is going on, WWE is still taking it seriously. In fact, there's reports that they're taking it so seriously, it's an all hands on deck situation where they try to think of creative ways, everyone, to boost what is going to be still a successful event. That means that the creative is still in flux. There is a lot of plans that were for this year's WrestleMania that are being set aside or at least put on hold as they think of other ways that they could possibly rearrange things in a way that'll boost sales. So one thing that isn't happening here, and let's just address that right away, this is not a reflection on the card. There is no card. Outside of one match, which is official, there is only, at this point, some direction and some guesses that we can have on where they're going with that direction and where that will end up at WrestleMania. But outside of Roman Reigns and CM Punk, this is not a rebuke of the card. So without a card, what is going on here? Why is there less ticket sales this year? I don't think that's any one thing. In fact, it is obviously a combination of things. For one, there is no John Cena. Last year, we knew we'd be getting John Cena's final match. That has to be a factor that there is no John Cena this time around. They are returning to the same city for the first time in a long time, really back to the early days of WrestleMania where they repeated cities. But yeah, they're going back to Las Vegas. If you recall, they pulled the rug out from under New Orleans. That was the original spot for WrestleMania 42. And they instead decided to go back to the city of Las Vegas. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So maybe the repeat destination is having something to do with it. Next year, WrestleMania is going to be in Saudi Arabia. So that could also have something to do with fans who go on an annual basis, deciding that, well, we've already been to Vegas. We're probably not going to Saudi Arabia. We'll wait a couple more years. There's folks who weren't necessarily happy with how WrestleMania turned out in Vegas last year, particularly the disappointing main event between John Cena and Cody Rhodes, the biggest match of the weekend. Failed to deliver on just pure creative terms, as well as for a lot of folks, the booking of the winner and loser of that particular contest. So, could there be some blowback on that? I think all of that is in play, but let's also remember that WWE is boosting their revenues by continuing to raise ticket prices. There's got to be a limit on what fans are willing to pay. This year's prices are significantly higher than last year's prices for the very same city. So all of those factors are coming in. And then elephant in the room, WrestleMania being a big international destination where wrestling fans from around the world gather, usually in the United States. Truth is, a lot of people are simply not traveling to the United States for wrestling or other reasons. International travel is down across the board. Vegas, being a large tourist destination, is one of the areas being hit hardest by this drop. In fact, if you look specifically at Canada, our closest neighbors to the north, 25% drop in Canadian travel to the Las Vegas. So all of that is absolutely what has us behind on ticket sales thus far this year. Will that continue? I'd say that you're going to see a boost. Obviously, it might not end up where we were last year. International travel may still be an issue and folks not come. But I do believe domestically, you're still going to move at least 10,000 or more tickets. You're going to get 50, 60,000 people into that stadium. It's going to be just fine. And speaking of being just fine, let's go to our next story, also about WrestleMania. Last year's WrestleMania. This is why I'm saying that things are going to be just fine. It was announced this week that WrestleMania 41 shattered all prior records for ticket sale revenue in the history of pro wrestling. WrestleMania 41's Night 1 and Night 2 combined to make more than $66 million. That is in ticket sales of around 113,000. 412, I think, is the number of tickets that reportedly make up that $66 million number in revenue. In addition to that ticket gross, WWE also benefited from a $5 million site fee from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, as well as another $4.2 million in tax credits from Nevada's film program. These are the reasons I said earlier when I referenced them. These are the reasons that WWE pulled the rug out from under New Orleans to run the show one more time in Las Vegas. Those incentives obviously help that bottom line and will help the bottom line again this year, regardless of where our ticket sales end up. One more WrestleMania story before we move on to other topics in the news. And WWE has reportedly reached out to the representatives of Bad Bunny to gauge his interest and his availability for WrestleMania 42 in Vegas. Reportedly, the conversations were positive, though there's nothing yet set in stone. Bunny, coming off the heels of one of the most talked about Super Bowl halftime shows in recent memory, obviously would be a big get for WWE and would obviously help address some of the interest and possibly some of the behind where we are in ticket sales. That is a way to move some tickets, I am sure. Logan Paul has already been very active on his social media, trying to instigate a war of words with Bad Bunny, setting up an angle. We will see. Moving on to the world of AEW. The Inspiration have signed with Tony Khan's company. The recent TNA tag champs and former WWE stars known at the time as the Iconics have signed with AEW, are All Elite. They made their debuts when AEW was doing their shows last week in Australia. Last weekend, Jesse McKay, Casey Lee made their debuts at a house show. Both Jesse and Casey are Australian, so it makes perfect sense that that would be where they debut. Half expected that they would be on TV this week. Not the case. Maybe this upcoming week is when they'll make their television debut. But the inspiration, not the Iconics trademark, but the inspiration are in fact now all elite. From arrivals to departures, let's move to NXT and the departure of Kelly Kincaid. She's no longer an announcer on the NXT brand. In fact, she had not just worked NXT, she was also working Evolve, and her contract was not renewed. She previously worked in the pre-Tony Khan era of Ring of Honor as Quinn McKay. So, Quinn, we wish you the best. And then finally, for those who were expecting Chris Jericho as a surprise in the Royal Rumble and who may be wondering why he has not appeared on WWE television as of yet, despite all the rumors, well, that's because apparently it would seem he is still under contract with AEW, despite that contract originally expiring at the end of 2025, reportedly so. Apparently, it would seem that Y2J may have, in fact, had his contract frozen by Tony Khan when Jericho took time off. Jericho has taken significant time off during the run of his AEW contract to go do Fozzy as well as other side projects that Jericho is involved in. So he took that time off early last year. He's not been seen on AEW television since last April, so we're going on almost a year. But if he still had time on that contract and Tony wants to play hardball about it, he does have that right to tack on whatever wasn't used in that contract to the end of that deal. And it could be what is perhaps preventing Y2J from appearing on WWE television. It was reported for the longest time that he would be finishing his career in WWE, going to the Hall of Fame, probably appearing at WrestleMania. All of that, of course, is in jeopardy, as we do not know just how much extra time was added onto that contract and whether or not Tony Khan will relent and allow Jericho to walk away. Something to watch for as we continue down WrestleMania season. Which brings us to our main event topic, and that is the final PLE on the road to WrestleMania, Elimination Chamber. Let's save those Elimination Chamber matches for last, and let's talk about the matches that are also on the card that are not Elimination Chamber matches. They're the easiest ones to predict. I want to hear from you who you think are going to win these contests. Let's start first with the Women's Intercontinental Championship, and that is champion Becky Lynch defending against AJ Lee, making her first single match in more than a decade. AJ shockingly returned in 2025 to WWE after being away for 10 years, but has primarily, when she has wrestled, and it has been sparingly, has been in a tag team. So this singles match with Becky Lynch is going to be a test for AJ for her ring rust, her endurance, but honestly, she's not shown a whole lot in the way of ring rust. And if you're going to get back in the ring with someone who you know is going to make you look good, you could not do any better than the man, Becky Lynch. It has been an entertaining feud that has been set up here for, honestly, they've been planting seeds for a while, but AJ has been back on television much more thus far in 2025 and has restoked the flames with Becky Lynch, driving Becky insane with just her mere presence. And I honestly think that if we see any sort of title change on Elimination Chamber, of the two matches that we currently have for championships, this is the one that it does seem as if AJ Lee may get the better of Becky. Where does that leave Becky moving into WrestleMania season? Would they move into another program with someone else? Or would they maybe hold off on AJ Lee's victory here in order to save it for WrestleMania? The problem with an event like Elimination Chamber or still having a couple months to go is that you have to do something between now and then to keep fans interested. So I don't think that you can save every last thing for WrestleMania. And I do believe that there's, in my mind, my prediction here is going to be that this is one that they're not going to hold for WrestleMania. They're going to give AJ her title victory now. So AJ for the win. That brings us to the only other match that isn't an Elimination Chamber match that is currently on the card, and that is for the World Heavyweight Championship. You have your champion CM Punk versus Finn Balor. This is going to be a great contest. They have good chemistry. They've had some great matches that have led up to this, but as we mentioned earlier, the only match that we currently have on the card of WrestleMania is a Night 2 main event between Roman Reigns and CM Punk. Now, how many of you out there think that the closing match of Night 2 of WrestleMania is going to be Finn Balor versus Roman Reigns? I'll show of hands, no hands. I completely agree with you that there is not really any chance that CM Punk is not going to be closing out the whole WrestleMania weekend there with Roman on Night 2, which means that, I'm sorry, Finn, I have enjoyed this push that you have received back into the singles ranks, and I think that you'll have a great match with CM Punk, but this is definitely Punk's match. Obviously, we know where CM Punk is going after this. Where Finn Balor goes after this is going to be maybe a more contentious and interesting question to ask, because he's been somewhat at odds for a while with a lot of his Judgment Day brethren, and this break off into the singles ranks has just isolated him even further. So does Finn have a Judgment Day storyline going into WrestleMania? Is this the fracture that splits him off from the group? May it even bring him into the fold of the babyface, since the group by and large is comprised of some pretty well heat-getting heels right now, particularly Dominic. I'm saying that that is probably where we're going with Finn after this. It's probably time. Judgment Day, I wouldn't say is stale, but it's definitely something that you have to keep moving if you want that drama to maintain any interest. And so I think that for Finn, a collision with Dom at WrestleMania could be in the cards. I do believe, because of the respect that CM Punk has shown Finn and the way that Finn has accepted that via handshake and his words, it just makes me feel like Judgment Day is not very happy with him, and they may even be involved in this to possibly cost him his match with CM Punk. However it goes down, though, it is definite that Punk is going to walk away with this victory and finish going to WrestleMania to finally main event. I know he said he main evented last year, but come on. It wasn't for a title. It wasn't a one-on-one. You know that this is going to be more in CM Punk's mind, what he was thinking of when he came back and wanted that WrestleMania moment, closing out the whole weekend. That leads us to the matches that bear the name of this PLE, and that is Elimination Chamber. Obviously, multi-person matches are some of the hardest to predict because of all the variables, but predict we will. But before we can talk about who's going to win the match, we need to finalize who's going to be in the match. So on Raw, this week, we will have two matches, one for the men, one for the women, to decide the final spot in Elimination Chamber. For the women's match, let's start there. We are going to see Io Sky versus Kairi Sane versus Raquel Rodriguez. Of those three women, I do believe that Io Sky is the most likely to punch her ticket, as it were, to that final spot in the Elimination Chamber. Io is, in most fans' minds, a main eventer. She has history with the other women in the match. She obviously has her bestie and tag team partner, Rhea Ripley, in the match already, and that is a multitude of reasons as to why I believe that Io is the right person to fill that last spot. And if that is the case, you're going to end up with a match of Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley versus Tiffany Stratton versus Asuka versus Kiana James. Now, Kiana is the surprise here. She is probably the least likely participant in this contest, but it does go to show that WWE obviously has a lot of faith in her to elevate her into a spot that is going to give her a higher profile. Obviously, I don't believe she's going to be someone who is going to be standing at the end. Could be, honestly, one of the first people eliminated. But just by being in this matchup, Kiana James is going to benefit. Now, how about for the rest of these women? Obviously, Rhea Ripley is a believable main eventer who has had that title match at WrestleMania before. Alexa Bliss is a former world champion. Asuka is a former world champion, and Tiffany Stratton was the biggest star WWE had in their women's division last year. They let her run roughshod. She didn't have her first loss until 2 months before the year end. So all of these ladies have a legitimate shot at winning this match outside of Kiana James, at least if you're looking at the storyline. But who does it make the most sense? It does appear that Alexa Bliss is very likely to choose Stephanie Vaquer. So who is going to be the one that goes up against Jade Cargill, should Jade Cargill still be champion come WrestleMania? I think that Rhea Ripley makes the most sense because when you just look at the physiques of the two powerhouses against each other, if you can't have Bianca Belair because of the injury, then I think that the next best look on a poster for WWE in a match that fans want to see but haven't really seen is Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill. So I believe that Rhea Ripley will win this. There will be some tension between her and Io. I know they're the current tag team champions. I don't know that that tag team championship reign makes it to WrestleMania, and this may be the beginning of the reasons as to why. Rhea is my prediction. And that leaves just one more match on the Elimination Chamber card, and that is what I think will be the main event. I think they'll start with a women's match and to the two title matches in between, and they will end on the men's Royal Rumble. But before not Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber. But before we get into the winners of who I think will win the men's Elimination Chamber, let's talk about who I think will win the final match that is going to be on Raw that will determine that last spot. And that will be Bronson Reed versus Jey Uso versus the original El Grande Americano. Not the new version, the Chad Gable version. Obviously, this will be a match that will probably involve the non-original version of El Grande Americano to continue that feud. So I think we can pretty much rule out Chad Gable. But I think that Jey Uso, to a lot of people who were into his singles run and his WrestleMania triumph last year, are going to be rooting for Jey. But if you look at who's already in the match, I think to me that means it's Bronson Reed who has to win this match because you have all faces except one heel in the match currently. I think this match for balance needs another heel, and the Vision obviously have been a big part of WWE programming over the last 6 months, and I think that Bronson Reed will take that final spot to put another heel and a powerhouse threat against the other gentlemen who already have earned their way into the Elimination Chamber. So, assuming that I'm right, it is Bronson Reed, but definitely we know that Randy Orton, LA Knight, Cody Rhodes, and Javon Evans, and the only other heel, Trick Williams, will be in this contest. We got the OG legend in Randy Orton. I don't think, though, it is Randy's time. He is there to appear, that let you know that you're watching a main event. and Randy Orton is always going to be a threat for WWE to pull the trigger on to put into a high-profile match at Mania. LA Knight, I feel like the luster has come off a bit with Knight. He still gets good crowd reactions, but WWE doesn't appear to be as much behind him. Obviously, he is legitimate as far as his presence in this match. No one will complain about that, but I don't think that he has a chance here. Bronson Reed, I do think is a threat, but I don't believe it's his either. I am happy to see the two new guys, right? So Javon Evans, Trick Williams, when I say new guys, I know they're not new, but they have been recently called up from NXT to take some spots on the main roster. And this is certainly a way to immediately let fans know these guys are big deals. You put them in with Randy Orton and LA Knight and Cody Rhodes, and you let them have a main event on a PLE, the last PLE going into WrestleMania, and they automatically come out of it. Even though they will not win, they come out of it winners. Trick Williams gets great reactions. The fans are hugely into his entrance. His charisma is off the charts. I think they'll give him some nice moments in this. But it is Javon Evans that I will say that you need to look out for, because that boy is bouncy, and the structure itself. If there's anyone who will benefit from the exposure in this match and the ways that you can manipulate that structure into offense that is going to look different than what you could do in a normal wrestling ring, Javon Evans is the man who is going to bounce off those steel chains, off of those chambers, hang from the top. Who knows what it is he's going to do, but I guarantee you they will book a spot or two that will have Javon Evans doing some things that have never yet been accomplished in an elimination chamber. And he will, I'm sure, pull them off and wow some folks. So he's going to show out for sure. But the one person that you may have noticed I have not talked about is the one that I think is going to win this. And sometimes you can overcomplicate things by trying to figure out what the swerve is, when sometimes the straight down the middle logical answer is the right answer. And Cody Rhodes, I know, is someone who has got some mixed reactions here lately, and some of that is his own doing. But there is no doubt about that QB1 is the centerpiece of WWE and has been for the last couple of years. After he's had a few WrestleMania main events, it would definitely appear that he is the most likely to continue on a path to another WrestleMania main event. Now, the way he does so could be something to watch. Sami Zayn was very accurate in his accusations this past week on SmackDown that Cody has been acting a little less chivalrous than the White Knight that he has been booked as for most of his time since his return to WWE. The white meat baby face character has definitely showed some shades of gray over the last couple of months. And I think that in some ways they're just teasing out for those fans who have been long wanting to see a heel Cody Rhodes. They're giving us a taste of what that can look like. Whether or not he would go full heel before Mania, I do feel it's interesting to see him show these tendencies, taking advantage of Sammy, for example, to get his spot in the Elimination Chamber. It's a little unusual to see this happening at this point in time, only because a heel Cody Rhodes is not going to be what we will have going up against a very obviously heel Drew McIntyre. I don't know that you could do that double switch. I don't know that fans would cheer Drew McIntyre in just less than 2 months' time at this point. Can you get the fans behind a despicable heel like Drew McIntyre? So I think that Cody's still going to play that tweener role, and I don't want to guess how it's going to end up at WrestleMania. That's a show for another time. I do think, though, that he comes out on top, beating Randy Orton, Javon Evans, Trick Williams, LA Knight, and I am going to say Bronson Reed. What do you think? Who do you believe is going to take that last spot? Who do you believe will be the last man standing? Do you think it's just ordained that it's going to be Cody Rhodes, or do you think they're going to swerve us and go a different direction and actually keep Cody out of one of the main events at this year's WrestleMania? Drop in the comments, and I would love to hear from you. All comments will get a response. It will be interesting. This is not a test. We are definitely on that road to WrestleMania, and this is really the last chance WWE has to shuffle up the card in a major, major way. And let's see what they do. And we will be back and we'll review it all next week and see what we think of their decisions. But before we say goodbye, we have a big finish to hit. If it's your first time watching the show, that's where we hit our 1, 2, 3, talking botch, match, and performance of the week. And let's start first with what I think is the botch of the week. And I mentioned him in our news segment. I intentionally left this part out of the news, even though it was news, but Logan Paul. It is easy to dislike Logan Paul because he is legitimately a heel in both his on-screen and his real life. Well, I guess his whole life is on screen. That's part of what makes it easy to hate him, right? The social media star has pretty much made as his brand, I am going to be annoying and get under your skin, and you're still going to watch me. And if that wasn't enough to hate the man, this week he sells a Pokemon card, a Pokemon Pikachu Illustrator. I don't even know what that is. I know that the man made $16.5 million selling this card. When he came out on Raw, I had yet to see the news. And when he made that comment about how I sold a card for more money than you'll ever see in your life, I thought, I have to look this up. And sure enough, what sounded like an overstatement by a heel exaggerating is no exaggeration. Someone truly with more money than sense spent $16.5 million to make Logan Paul that much more wealthy and that much more arrogant and that much more of a heel. I mean, if you didn't hate Logan Paul before, he just got $16.5 million from selling a Pokemon card. Come on, you have to hate that. That's my botch of the week. Performance of the week, I'm going with Swipe Right. From the Vanity Project, these Evolve kids have, well, not to use a pun, but they have evolved and have moved on to NXT. And not only are they moved to NXT and doing double duty, going back and forth, they, in a big way this week, showed out in a Fatal 4-Way for a shot at the NXT Tag Team titles. They beat more established teams, Hank and Tank, OTM, the Culling. Those three teams are NXT mainstays, and Vanity Project, Swipe Right, are new kids on the block. Not only did they get the rub by being in the match, they were allowed to win it. So it's obvious that despite their baby faces, this is something that WWE is behind in a big way. And so keep your eyes out on Swipe Right. And then match of the week. There was a lot of good wrestling this week, but I am going with Kenny Omega versus Swerve Strickland from this Wednesday night's AEW Dynamite. There was several matches on Raw that were great. There were a couple of matches on Collision I also thought were fantastic as well. But there was nothing that was as good or as meaningful as the very first ever contest between Kenny Omega and Swerve Strickland. And then, of course, the brutal attack by Swerve afterwards just added to everything. These two guys, obviously, you'd think that when you have former world champions of this caliber facing off against one another for the very first time, maybe Tony Khan should save it for a pay-per-view. That is obviously a criticism that Tony gets a lot, but he definitely doesn't always believe that you can burn out a wrestling audience or that you have any concerns about hot-shotting those matches to television. And for free this week, TV viewers, you got a pay-per-view quality match between Kenny Omega and Swerve Strickland. And if there was ever any doubt as to how Kenny Omega is feeling, whether or not that ring rust is there, whether or not his body is responding to a full-time schedule again on AEW television, this should dispel any of those notions, just the way that he and Swerve Strickland brought the house down this past week on Dynamite. Again, a lot of good wrestling this week, but if you go back and see one match, I would suggest that that is the match you go see. And speaking of things to go see, I hope that you come back and see us again here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show. You see our schedule scrolling there at the bottom. We have a very full schedule throughout the month of March as we get ready for WrestleMania season in April. But first things first, we have Elimination Chamber coming next Saturday, and we're going to talk about it on our next broadcast. So whether you watch us live, whether you're watching us on YouTube or our Facebook channel, however you watch us, please come back. Let's talk Elimination Chamber together on our next show of the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Until then, as Doug would say, go watch some wrestling. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.